I've never told anybody this before. Let it out. Here it comes. Hello, Huge Movie Fanatic Nate, coming at you, continuing my, Christmas/holiday movie reviews, if you will, coming your way to review. So this is how it went. Basically in 2000, I think it was 2011, was the first holiday season of this channel, Huge Movie Fanatics, back when I, along with another fellow named Matt, used to do reviews. Me and him reviewed the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, and then that's back when I used to put clips of the movies and stuff in the videos and stuff, and because of me putting clips in that review, it subsequently got deleted by YouTube, and it wasn't until last year around this time I actually re-uploaded our review of Silent Night, Deadly Night. In that review I mentioned that the sequels aren't even really worth talking about at all or anything like that. And I guess I was just speaking for that particular year or that particular day of reviews or whatever. I mean, let's face it, there's definitely things to say about the sequels to Silent Night, Deadly Night, and as each year goes on, and I review more and more Christmas horror movies and stuff, you obviously are left with less and less to talk about, and it's just, I figured hell with it. Let's rewatch these movies since I own all of them, all 5 of them, and review them. So that's basically what I'm going to be doing now, is basically reviewing 2, 3, 4, and 5, and right now obviously I'm starting with Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, and this is the VHS that I acquired sometime along the lines previously viewed from a video store. And I actually, should be said that I absolutely love this artwork. I think this, the Christmas ball with the gun artwork, in the fireplace and the trees, absolutely fantastic. And what's cool about it being a horror movie is not a lot of time, in horror movies you don't really expect to see just a handgun in the artwork or in the movie in general, and it's just kind of like, as a matter of fact, I don't think a gun like this was used. I think it was a revolver, that Ricky would later use. But I do like the artwork, and it is very strange how, as I said, I mean, normally a handgun is not a weapon in a horror movie. So this is the video cassette from IVE, dated 1987. And the back there, Mother Superior's head, the guy electrocuted, and Ricky in his Santa outfit. And that spine just has, the picture of Ricky in his Santa outfit. So then in 2003, Anchor Bay would do us a huge favor and release a double feature of Silent Night, Deadly Night and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. I think this is the only way, if I'm not mistaken, to see the only time Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 has been on disc. I don't know if you can even get Part 2 on any other DVD or disc than this. So, if I'm incorrect in saying that, please leave a comment in the comment section. But this was a really cool double feature they put out, and it had audio commentary with the director, and it was the unrated version, of course, with the VHS quality footage of the unrated material put into Silent Night, Deadly Night, and of course, the rest of the sequels were always just rated R. But what's really cool about their treatment of Part 2, because it's actually got commentary with the writer/director, will that be writer/editor/director, and looks like a writer, and then it says actor James Newman. I don't know exactly which guy he is in the movie, but theatrical trailer and poster and still gallery and DVD-ROM original screenplay of Part 2 on this particular release. So I'm not sure, but this might be the only DVD or disc that you can get Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 on, and it's featured in a really pretty good anamorphic 185 transfer. So on to my review of the actual movie. So basically, I mean, this movie, when I just think about it in general, I give it a lot of flack for basically being the first 40 minutes of this movie, more or less, is basically highlights from the first movie. Obviously, a movie that does that deserves, gets a lot of and deserves a lot of flack for doing that. The movie starts with, of course, the end of the first movie. They left it completely wide open for Billy's little brother Ricky to basically take on the mantle of being the psychopathic Christmas killer, if you will, and that's exactly what this sequel does, obviously, starting with basically, I kind of like, having rewatched this movie recently, I kind of like the structure of the movie is, and I think if you're going to do a movie that uses 40 minutes of footage from a previous entry, the structure is fairly competent of this movie, where it's basically it starts with seeing Ricky at a later date being an adult in a mental hospital or whatever, being just waiting for this guy to come in and question him and tape record him and whatever, and do an account of his life, or his life and everything up until the point of him being whatever, convicted or whatever potential situation he's in at the time. So basically, the movie starts with him as an adult in this mental house, and the doctor coming in with the tape recorder and starting to talk. And when he starts to talk, obviously we see footage from the first movie, and his kind of the scenes will kind of be interspersed with his recollections, audio recollections over the scenes, if you will, and stuff like that. So that's basically how the first 40 minutes of this movie operates, where its majority of it is basically just highlights of the first movie and then him talking about it. And what's so funny is, like, Ricky was, obviously we see scenes where, his family was accosted by the robber in the Santa outfit in the first movie. And what's really funny is, well, Ricky was a baby during that scene, so the only way he could really know about it was obviously Billy telling him later on, and stuff like that, works for an excuse how Billy knows this stuff or can recount this stuff. But what's really funny is, once Billy is grown up enough in 18 and actually moves out of the orphanage, I think it's fair to say that, maybe, but basically, regardless of if Billy comes back to visit Ricky in the orphanage or not after that, regardless, basically, it could happen, but basically, after Billy starts, getting nuts and going crazy, there's no way Ricky could know anything about the, because basically Ricky is telling the tale of, what Billy did on Christmas Eve, in the Santa outfit killer. And there's no way Billy could know all these details, which is so hilarious about this movie. And they even mentioned earlier on that it's just like, how do you know this? And he's like, I was there, regarding him being a baby in the car when, they were attacked by the Santa Claus robber. But, that's obviously, it's a sequel horror movie to another goofball Christmas horror movie. So, I guess those kind of details you just have to kind of forget about. But what's ironic is they actually mention it kind of, Billy told me everything. During about earlier parts in the movie, and then they kind of, once Billy gets out of the orphanage after he's 18 and goes and gets a job at Ira's Toys, obviously there's no way for Ricky to know anything basically about that horrible night, because Billy would come back to the orphanage and basically get shot down by the police at the end of the first movie. So I find that point to be really, really funny, that Ricky can recount all this stuff of Billy being out on his own killing people on Christmas Eve. But, obviously, like I say, it's just a sequel to a goofy horror movie, so whatever. So basically, that's how the first 40 minutes of this movie, spends its time, just, highlights of the first movie. In a lot of ways, you almost don't have to see the first movie, because I think they show you every kill in this movie, and then I was watching it thinking, oh no, they don't show the kill of the at the beginning of the movie of the robber guy dressed as Santa killing the store clerk. Well, no, they do later on when they're watching a movie at this basically screening room of some whatever studio or whatever in Hollywood. They actually show a shot of that scene from Silent Night, Deadly Night, as a horror movie they're watching. So I think every single kill in Silent Night, Deadly Night you actually do get to see in this movie. So who knows? Maybe if you don't want to sit through all the exposition of the first movie, of course you're missing the fantastic performance of Grandpa, aka Will Hare, doing his fantastic classic spiel, which we didn't mention in our review of Silent Night, Deadly Night. You do miss that. I would obviously recommend watching, Silent Night, Deadly Night, the original in its entirety, but it is kind of ironic how part 2 is like a greatest hits or a, best of the first movie kind of a thing for the first 40 minutes. And then what's kind of cool is then it does go into, obviously, Ricky continuing to tell the tale of his life after the events of the first movie, where she's adopted by a man and a woman, and, him being traumatized. Of course, he wasn't, well, I guess what's stupid is, he was a baby when that stuff happened, to his family and stuff, so he probably wouldn't remember it. It probably didn't even really, remember it or whatever, but he was traumatized by the events that happened at the orphanage when the policeman, or not the policeman, the deaf guy in the Santa outfit approached him and the policeman shot him down. So basically, I don't know, was it within the same day or two, Ricky was, witness to basically two Santas being gunned down in front of him. The first being just a deaf whatever guy who worked for, was coming to play Santa for the orphanage, and then the second of which being his older brother who was gunned down in front of him in a Santa outfit. So even if he doesn't remember what happened to him when he was a baby, I mean, those two events, which I think happened, if I'm not mistaken, in either, if not in the same day, for sure within 2 days in a row. One day bam, and the second day bam. I'm not exactly sure what days those things happened. It might have been the very same day, I don't know, but in a very short period of time, Ricky gets to see two Santas gunned down dead in front of him. So after the 40-minute mark, then obviously continues the story of Ricky, which is, finally you're getting to see some new footage and material. And as I said, Ricky was adopted by a man and a woman, and we see his life kind of being normal, his life being normal for a while. But unfortunately, because of what happened to him, he's triggered by the color red, obviously, seeing two Santas gunned down, one of them being his older brother. Whenever he sees red, he's triggered by it and sees flashbacks of those Santas being killed and destroyed and stuff like that. So red is basically a trigger for him. The two, the couple who adopted him sometime along the line have second thoughts about adopting the kid. Maybe he's too much for them to handle, whatever. They stick with him. The dad ends up dying. I mean, basically what we see is Ricky grows up relatively normal or whatever, and then once the dad dies for whatever reasons, I don't think Ricky had a part in it, because Ricky mentions that he's actually really disturbed and upset when his stepfather ends up dying. Later on, we see him as a young adult just going for a walk. And there's this couple. I mean, this is just such goofiness. Then there's this couple with the red Jeep. As I stated, red triggers them. So there's this couple with this red Jeep. He's on a walk, just straightening out his thoughts or whatever. And he comes across this couple where this guy basically tries to, he wants to mess around with this woman he's with, and she's not wanting it at the time. And he kind of does this thing where, of course, he pulls open her blouse like he's going to rape her or whatever. The same kind of situation that the robber Santa did to his mom at the beginning of the first movie. Of course, he was a baby and he was in the car and he didn't see that. But those are just details you're not supposed to remember or realize. So obviously being triggered by his red Jeep and seeing this guy, this kind of, whatever, asshole guy doing to his girlfriend and the woman he's with, triggers him to go basically in a relatively creative, in a small way, creative for this goofy horror movie scene. He's kind of basically gets in, the way they do it's really cool, where this guy goes and gets a beer from his red Jeep and comes around, the camera comes around, and then when it comes around, we see Ricky in the driver's seat, and he starts the Jeep and basically just runs this guy over. And I think basically that is the first kill he ever did, and I'm not too sure. I mean, the way it's presented in the movie, the woman actually thanks him for doing it, which is kind of funny. This movie it should be said, is really, doesn't take itself too seriously, kind of more like the first one did. It's a lot more tongue-in-cheek, and for that, when I think of this movie, I give it a hard time, but revisiting it recently, it is a fun, entertaining movie for what it is, because it really just knows that it's just goofy as all crap and doesn't take itself too seriously. So the woman thanks him for killing this guy, her boyfriend, or the guy she was with, and then they kind of just part ways. And I don't think, obviously that kill or whatever was ever documented by the authorities or whatever. It just probably they both walked away from that situation. And then we cut to later on when, I guess, he's older and he's just working as a cook or something, and this is later on when we actually see him portrayed by, it should be said that the guy who's in the mental house and portrays Ricky and does all the recounts of his early life and stuff is played by, plays him towards the end of the movie, is played by this muscular muscle man guy who's absolutely fantastic, just over the top in his eyebrows, and it's kind of like, I'm not a fan of wrestling or whatever, but it kind of makes you think of like during I don't know what wrestling is like now, but during the 80s, these wrestlers had all these just over the top personas, and I'm gonna destroy him, and he's gonna come, you know, it's maybe not that much, but maybe it's a more, the guy who plays Ricky in this movie is maybe a more subdued kind of wrestler in this movie, but he definitely does like the eyebrows and just this kind of over exaggerated emoting when he's just tries to play this, and I guess he does it really well, or relatively well, this just badass or hard ass badass, you know, just guy, and just because of his physique you kind of just I guess go with it, if you will. And he's just like, the first scene we actually get to see this guy who's, you know, you spent the movie telling you this tale of his childhood and everything like that, actually in a kill scene where he's just taking out the garbage at this, working as a cook or whatever he's working, and he comes across this guy beating up this other guy who owes someone money or whatever, and he's got a red handkerchief or whatever, which triggers him, and he kills this guy. It should be said, this guy who beats up this other guy is really funny, and that's a funny scene. And he's like, I hope you don't pay so I can come back and kill you or whatever. But this scene where he's just this other guy's beating up this guy who owes someone money is funny. It's just like, ugh. You know, it's just, the movie is completely, like, the new footage shot for this movie is completely just played for just fun. And, you know, having rewatched it, I mean, it's enjoyable. It's a fun movie to behold because of that fact. And of course, you know, Ricky rather, will kill this guy with, famously, once he sees his red handkerchief or whatever, this guy who was beating up this other guy, he'll kill this guy with the umbrella, and then that'll be that. And then I think we see a scene where he recounts, you know, meeting this girl which is of course this girl who would go on to play within, I don't know, like basically the next year or two, would go on to be in Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, playing one of these two girls, the friend of, I can't remember, the other girl who needs a little touch-up work or whatever. But this woman doesn't use her normal name because I guess this was like a non-union movie or something like that. But it is the same girl who would go on to be in, you know, Friday the 13th Part 7, New Blood. And, you know, there's a brief account of them meeting, and, you know, kind of a, whatever, I guess, erotic scene of them, their bodies being mashed together and panning up and down their naked bodies or whatever for a supposed sex scene. And basically the brief account of, you know, Ricky's one and only, you know, I guess, experience with a woman or whatever, and how quickly that goes bad when her old fling, played by this goofy guy who apparently bleached his hair or blonded his hair just for this role, Chip, I guess there's an old fling of hers, shows up at this movie theater, which is, you know, clearly a screening room at some, you know, studio or whatever. That scene is just funny, and it's just, this movie is just basically a ridiculous kind of hoot or whatever. And then that scene will lead on to another scene where they're just walking down the street and they come across Chip again, her old fling, and that basically, you know, that interaction basically leads to Ricky killing Chip, and then basically this girl he's seeing as a result, and then that scene begins the classic, probably one of the most standout classic scenes from this whole movie, where they actually had a use of a Steadicam for that day, where basically Ricky, you know, comes across, kills those two people, and he's just like, where's the gun come from? I can't remember, the gun must come from the cops. So he kills two people, and then I don't know, somehow I can't remember exactly how the scene works, but somehow the cops show up in a car, or just not a cops, just one cop, I guess, comes at him, and he's like pointing the gun at him, and he just basically takes it and points it at the cop, and he shoots him in the head or whatever, and at that point he's got a gun. And this scene just basically is just a little scene of him walking down the street just shooting random people, which, you know, is funny in the way they're portrayed. Obviously it wouldn't be funny in real life or whatever, but this scene includes one of the famous lines that I, you know, was going to open the review with, but then having watched the movie recently, I just saw that other line, I'm like, that's really funny, so I did that one to open the review. But the famous shot of Garbage Day, of course, where this guy is just putting out the garbage, and, you know, he's got, you know, Ricky sees him or whatever, and he just shoots him for no inexplicable reason or whatever. And then this scene ending with this, you know, for this movie's budget, a big stunt where he shoots someone coming at him in a car, and the car just misses him and rolls over and just explodes for no inexplicable reason or whatever. And then at that point, I think, more police show up, and that is when he is basically arrested, and that leads you up to the point where, the movie starts, where that is the event that got him, institutionalized or whatever. And what's really cool is, Ricky's been telling the story to this guy the whole time, and then after we were caught all the way up to this point of the movie where he's been arrested by the cops, then we see that basically Ricky has killed this guy, who he's been, this shrink or whatever, whoever, this guy who he's been telling the story to the whole movie. He strangled him or whatever, killed him, and just in a very unrealistic manner breaks out of the nut house or whatever, and basically the last, 15 minutes of this movie is Ricky going to, escaping, breaking out, going to kill some guy in a Santa outfit who's, one of those bell ringers or whatever. We don't see it on camera, we just hear it or whatever, and basically there's Ricky's whole idea to the end of this movie is to go and kill Mother Superior, obviously played by a different woman at this point, who's had a stroke, and for some reason she's got this growth or whatever the hell on the side of her face makeup. I don't know why they did that or whatever, but you can I don't know if it was to try to hide the fact that it's a different woman. You can still clearly see it's a different woman. But I think the woman, the woman who played Mother Superior in the original movie, obviously was classic and, did a fantastic job. But, this is, I never really realized it, which should have been obvious a lot of the times when I watched this movie, that this is this is a long time later after that first movie, so, it makes sense that she would look, be older and look different or whatever. I think the woman who played Mother Superior in, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 did a fine job for herself, and it should be, I don't want to take any credit away from that woman who did a fine job as Mother Superior in her own right, being a more, an older version of the character. So basically, Ricky just breaks out and goes in, with one of these. I don't know if they mentioned where he got this from, but with one of these, he goes in basically in a cat and mouse scene at Mother Superior's apartment or whatever, offs Mother Superior obviously cuts her head off, as you can see in the back of this VHS. And then I think he's basically gunned down by cops at that point, and I think that's pretty much the end of the movie. So it's a movie that when I think about it, I'm just like, oh man, the first half of it is just the footage from the first movie. But every time I watch it, which obviously I kind of tend to do maybe more or less every year this time of year, I'm kind of reminded about how, even though it does use 40 minutes or so of footage from the first movie, the structure of this movie is relatively kind of cool in a way, by him telling the story and using that footage, and then continuing his story past the first movie into the second movie, only to have him break out at the end and do his revenge or whatever. So even it being just 40 minutes of the first movie, I'm having rewatched this recently, this movie's a hoot. It's absolutely just funny and just kind of very enjoyable for people who enjoy campy, just what the fuck kind of horror movies. So I'm going to actually give this movie 2 stars out of 4 stars. As I said, when I think about it, I just roll my eyes about the reused footage from the first movie. But it does have its own positive merits, and this guy is an absolute hoot as this Ricky. Absolutely fantastic. It would have been cool to have a commentary with him, maybe someday along the line. Maybe Scream Factory will release some of the sequels to Silent Night, Deadly Night, maybe Part 2 or whatever, and actually have a commentary with that guy. That'd be really fun to hear. It should be said that every sequel to Silent Night, Deadly Night is obviously shot in California, and is all just sunny summer California or sunny Christmas California look, where there's no snow or anything like that, like the first movie. That's one of the things I love about the first movie. It's actually done in Utah, from what I understand, or something like that, and a lot of it is actually done in the snow. Whereas all the sequels are completely California Christmas, if you will. So thank you very much for watching my review of Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, and as always, we'll catch you next time.